What we're going to get into today, I'm going to try my best not to get too bogged down in the weeds, but there is a lot. There's a lot in this doctrine that is taught. Probably a lot, I'm afraid, you're going to learn this morning when you think, oh, I didn't realize all of that. When I say premillennialism, kind of what are some of the topics that y'all think about? I don't even know what premillennial is, Ben. Okay. Right. So, yeah, probably what we're going to get into, huh? Oh, I thought somebody, be careful, you'll bid on that thing in an auction. So, but anyway, yeah, premillennialism, we're going to break that down. And what you're going to find is, oh, okay, well, I've heard some of this stuff. I know what this is about. So, we're going to just introduce it this morning. So, if you're curious about this, obviously we understand that kind of being before. So, we're going to be talking about events that happened before. So, that's the pre. The mill, or milli, Latin, 1,000. So, it's all right. So, there's going to be things that are happening before 1,000, and then we have like our annual, the Latin there for years. So premillennial. So before 1,000 years. And as Brother B.J. Clark, who taught us this, we were taught this our last quarter of Memphis, the same quarter of Revelation and all that stuff, because there's a lot going on. But Brother B.J. said the ism is it ain't so, which was hilarious, that when I typed ain't, it auto-corrected me, and I thought, I didn't think it would auto-correct me to ain't, but I guess I have not typed ain't. Miss Carolyn, you'll be happy that I had not typed ain't in none of my PowerPoints. But anyway, as Brother Clark said, the ism means it's not so, it ain't so. So really, I mean, but the ism is like a study, so that's why. Premillennialism. So it's the events that are going to be before the 1,000-year reign of Christ. There's a lot. So what we're going to be looking at here is essentially premillennialism is the events before the literal 1,000-year reign of Jesus. So they'll go to, I know a lot of people, and I'm appreciative of this, and we'll take our time when we go through this. Revelation chapter 20, we won't read all of it, but just kind of make a note. In Revelation 20, it talks about this 1,000-year reign of Christ. And that Satan will be bound, there in verse 2, and laid hold upon the dragon, that old serpent, which is the devil, and Satan, and bound him 1,000 years, which is still interesting, because they're going to take that as a literal, and we're going to get into how you translate and kind of read prophecy, but it has to be a literal 1,000 years. And then we'll find that Christ is going to come, verse 6, and blessed and holy is he that hath part in the first resurrection. On such the second death hath no power, but they shall be priests of God and of Christ, and shall reign with him 1,000 years. So then when the 1,000 years, verse 7, are expired, Satan shall be loosed out of his prison. So they take this as a literal 1,000-year reign, which, again, if you're going to be consistent, if you look at verse 1 of chapter 20, I saw an angel come down from heaven having a key of the bottomless pit, and a great chain in his hand. You've got to take that literal too. There's somewhere on this earth, right? There's a literal bottomless pit. Now, I'm not trying to make light of this, but what I want you to understand is many people will hear these things. They'll hear 1,000-year reign, millennial reign of Christ. They'll hear stuff like, Satan being bound and the Antichrist rising up and tribulations and things like that. And what we find is that they don't really understand all of it to the extent that they should, and they just kind of hear these words and they kind of go through there with that. So we have to take Revelation 20 seriously and literally when we read about the millennial reign. And that's, again, the pre-millennial. What are the events? That's what we're going to introduce here. I'm telling you, I was talking to a buddy of mine, preaches up in Dresden. I said I was going through all that stuff, and I was like, man, this is just, it's a lot. It's a lot, but and the more we get into it, you're like, wait a minute now. The reason I preached on the second coming this morning, remember what Paul and Peter said, that Christ will return like a thief in the night. No one will know. Judgment, earth will be destroyed, and that's it. We'll be in heaven with him. Those who are not faithful will be in destruction in hell. But just let's go through all this. I'm telling you, it's kind of like I said. I told the young adults, they were like, we're doing a study on how to study the Bible, and I said, you think you want to know, and you do want to know, but there's a lot more to it than you might think. So let's get into it. What you have to, if you believe this, if you believe any part of this, think of this as like a table with legs. and you're standing on this table, and if we knock one of these legs out, well, the table's not going to hold itself up because we have to have all these legs up from under it to help us to stand on this. So what we have to understand is, what you have to, if you believe this stuff, is that we are in the church age. What it means is that Christ came to this earth, and he was going to set up his kingdom on earth. Even though Jesus, and we'll talk about this later on when we get into it, even though Jesus specifically says, my kingdom is not of this earth, he was going to. The Jews rejected Jesus, and they killed him. So plan B is they're going to have the church. That's where we're in right now, this temporary kingdom. And we're going to be in the church age, and the church age is going to last from Christ ascending into heaven till the rapture. Now, I'm going to have a chart later on here. We'll kind of get to some of this. So essentially what we're looking at is we're in this church age. This is plan B. God, Christ, when he came, he failed. And he was not able to establish his kingdom because the Jews killed him. So in the end times, they're saying, again, the increased apostasy, 2 Timothy 3, when you read that, and even into 2 Timothy 4, 2 Thessalonians 2, you'll get into like the man of perdition, the man of sin, that kind of stuff, the falling away there in 2 Thessalonians 2. But anyway, that's another lesson for a later day. But what's important is we're in the church age. We're in plan B. And what we're waiting on here in this church age is what they will teach is we're looking for the rapture. That's next. All right? So now what happens is one of these days, we don't know when, we are going to be raptured. The faithful are going to be raptured up into heaven. Again, 1 Thessalonians 4, 13 through 18 is where they get this because of that phrase, caught up. Again, it isn't even transliterated into rapture. It's just that word kind of means the same thing as what that word means. And we'll get into that when we study the rapture. They'll look at 1 Corinthians 15 through 51 through 52. And they'll talk about, again, the changing will be changed. In the blink of an eye and the twinkling of an eye will be changed. And then John 14, 1 through 3. Is that where Jesus says, I go to prepare a place for you? And if I go to prepare a place, I'll come again. 14, 1 through 3. Yes, in my Father's house are many mansions. All right, so that's where they're getting that Christ says, I'm gone, the rapture's coming, I'm going to rapture you, the faithful, to me. But, and we'll get into this again in more detail as we get through this, but there is great discussion between people that hold the position of the rapture, the position of premillennialism, that the rapture will occur either pre-trib, which means pre-tribulation, before the 7 years of tribulation, that the rapture will occur. And that's usually what everybody wants. Everybody wants the faithful ones to be raptured up into heaven before the really bad stuff gets here. I was watching a video on this, and because people in the United States, we're not persecuted at all. But you think about people like in China and those places, they're being persecuted pretty good right now. But then we get over here in America think, well, God's not going to let the church really get persecuted hard. He's going to rapture us up. Well, the church is being persecuted pretty hard the world over, Muslim areas and things like that. So anyway, pre-trib is the one everybody wants because that raptures me up to go to be with the Lord, and I don't have to deal with anything bad happening here on earth. Mid-trib is the idea of a 3.5 year period of good times. Then we're raptured up, and then we have 3.5 bad times. Post-trib, as it kind of implies, that we have to go through all of it. And we go through the 7 years of tribulation, then we're raptured up, and then Christ comes, then we're right back down again. So we'll get into that a little deeper. But again, what we've got to remember is we're waiting on, the people who believe this are waiting on the rapture. If you talk to people about the rapture, this is what they're getting at. But I would be curious to hear their opinion of when the rapture will occur, pre-trib, mid-trib, or post-trib. All right. Now after that, again, we don't know if we're going to be raptured before, during, or after. But during this 7 years of tribulation, there's going to be the rise of the Antichrist. All right. Now, what this individual is going to be kind of looked at as a global, political, religious leader. And again, they're kind of taking this from places in like Daniel and Revelation, even though John tells us there are many antichrists, and we'll get into that when we get into that teaching. But the 7 year covenant or peace, he makes this agreement with Israel, and they get this from Daniel chapter 9, verse 27. that the Antichrist, he's going to come, he's going to rise up, and again, some holding this view, he's going to make this covenant with peace, and there's going to be 3.5 years of peace and prosperity, and then 3.5 years we're going to be in really bad times. Now again, you can look, and that's why people get so fascinated with this stuff, but you can put any kind of leader in the world and put him in the place of this kind of a very general. Many will look and say, "Oh, Donald Trump, right? He's the Antichrist." No, that's not the case. He is not the Antichrist. People could look at Hitler, right? Rising up. Hitler, he could fit the description of the Antichrist. Very charismatic kind of guy, rising up through there, being elected into those positions, and then the havoc that he did after he got into that position. So, yeah, and it was to the Jews, right? So you could put Adolf Hitler in as the Antichrist. All of these, what's important is the Caesars, the religious rulers, all could fit this generalized idea of this man. So then we've got to have the right. So again, now, 7-year tribulation. Now, Daniel's 70 weeks, that's going to be an interesting lesson to try to teach. But what happens is, again, here's kind of the idea. First half, war, famine, increased persecution. Midpoint, Antichrist breaks the covenant with Israel. The abomination of desolation is in the temple. Now, note, if he's in the temple, what it means is that the temple has to be rebuilt back in Jerusalem. But, as we've noted in some class, there's a Muslim mosque, the Dome of the Rock. It's sitting on the temple grounds, or right there around the temple foundation. So you're going to have to knock that thing down before you're going to build the temple back, and that's not going to happen anytime soon. But anyway, nonetheless, you have to have these events happen. Again, Matthew 24:15, the abomination of desolation in the temple, just like Daniel talked about. So got to have the temple built back. And I used to not argue, but I used to talk with a guy at work. He was really heavy on the premillennial stuff. And I said, well, I don't have to worry about Christ returning anytime soon. He's like, well, why? I said, because the temple's not rebuilt. I said, if, all this stuff is going to happen when the temple's rebuilt, and the temple's not rebuilt, so I don't have to really worry about it until then. Again, we have to take all these things literal. In the second half, intense judgment, the stuff that you've never seen before, and they get that from Matthew 24:21, which Matthew 24 we'll talk about, is talking about the destruction of Jerusalem, and that was a very horrible time for the Jews that were stuck in that city, eating each other, eating their babies, things like that. So pretty bad. So again, Revelation 16, God's wrath, the bowls, right? That's what we're getting into. That's next. So tribulation, right? The Antichrist is coming. Then there's some tribulation, 7 years. Then we have heavenly judgment unleashed. So after this 7 years of tribulation, it's going to be at that time that God's wrath is going to be poured out. We're going to look at the 7 seals, the 7 trumpets, the 7 bowls of wrath, all of that in the Revelation. I'll get you John MacArthur's interpretation of all this here in just a moment. So we have, again, it's all unleashed. Here, again, the Battle of Armageddon. That's when all this is going to happen, right? So we hear about the Battle of Armageddon probably. We've heard about... Oh, I'm sorry. I'm probably touching this too much. Thank you, son. My IT guy. Okay, there we go. All right, I will try to be a little easier on hitting that, but I don't know why. Carson does it very well through the PowerPoint on the service, but not through class. Hitting it too hard, I guess. All right, so anyway, so we have the heavenly judgment, right? 7 bowls, seven seals, 7 trumpets, 7 bowls being poured out, and then the Battle of Armageddon. So now what we've had is the dead, the faithful on earth raptured up into heaven. We're up there with the Lord. While here on this earth, the Antichrist rises, tribulation occurs, and then it goes from bad to worse, like we've ever seen before. He's in the temple. He's exalting himself as God, this Antichrist. God's wrath finally pours out on everybody. Then we're going to gather up the nations into Palestine, and we're going to have the Battle of Armageddon, or Armageddon. Anyway, Brother, Thomas. What was the preacher up in Nashville? Thomas. My goodness. Don't you hate that right in front of everybody? I've got his book in there in my office. Anyway, I'll think of it here in a minute if I don't think about it. But anyway, a very, very well-known preacher in the Brotherhood. Passed away recently. Huh? Who? No, not Thomas B. Warren. It wasn't Thomas. Anyway, I've got his book in there. I'll think of it here in a moment. He's got a realistic view of Revelation, and he does an outstanding job. If you take the battle, the field of Armageddon, right? Megiddo. I think it's in Revelation, I guess it's in 16, but I think Revelation 20 speaks about, let me look, the gathering them from Gog and Magog and going to battle there. But maybe I'm in the wrong spot in 20. But I do know they're supposed to come from Gog and Magog, and they're gonna get on this battlefield. Maybe this 16. That's just when they're talking. In 16, 12 through 16, they're talking about going to battle in this place in the Hebrew tongue, Armageddon. But anyway, the field that they're going to be fighting on, if you look at it, that was going to be, there's no way that amount of people can fit logically on that piece of ground. If you put the area of a foot soldier, like a 3x3 square, and the horsemen, when you put on there, they just won't fit. They won't fit on this field. But anyway, it's a literal battle. It's a literal battle. The nations are going to gather. Tom Holland, thank you. Thank you, Brittany. I was trying to think of Uncle Tom's Porch, the GBN. Yes, Tom Holland has an outstanding book, The Realistic View of Revelation. It's very thin. And he figures all those concepts out. When we get into the Battle of Armageddon, I'll bring that in. We can look at it. Thank you, Brittany. Tom Holland. But anyway, I guess Thomas Holland is on his book, is maybe why I was thinking of it. But anyway, nonetheless, they're going to gather. Now, when, again, they've raptured up, bad times coming, Antichrist is here, war in Palestine, the second coming. Now we bring Christ coming back with all those saints that were carried on before. And so this is a visible bodily and power and glory. Christ is coming in that way. And he's going to defeat the Antichrist and defeat the false prophet, and he's going to judge the nations, which that was a little different than another reading I was doing, but I don't think he had it judging the nations this quickly. But anyway, this is what one place I was looking at said, pretty concise. So here's that second coming. All that has to happen before, right? Now remember, people that we know are going to be raptured up. They're just going to be gone. The Antichrist is going to arise. There's going to be a great persecution. And then, when they battle for the Battle of Armageddon, then Jesus returns. Now, did that sound like what we were reading in the sermon? All right? That's going to come as a thief in the night. And repetitively through Scripture, we read that the day of the Lord is coming as a thief in the night. Thief in the night. Thief in the night. You're not going to know. But, in my mind, I think, well, I could pretty pinpoint that, right? When these things begin to occur, I could pinpoint when Christ is going to return. But that's not what Scripture's do, which we'll get into how we read this. Again, you do not take, when you can take a easy to understand passage, you don't put that up, when you put that up against a hard to understand passage, you pick the easy to understand passage every time. You don't go to the complex passage if there's an easier way that it's taught somewhere else. So after the second coming of Christ, again, this great battle is going to ensue. Christ is going to be victorious. The Antichrist is defeated. False prophets defeated. They're thrown into the lake of fire. Then we have the binding of Satan. So again, in Revelation 20, we have a literal chain, a literal binding of Satan for a literal 1,000 years in the bottomless pit. So you have the resurrection of the martyrs that were killed during the tribulation. So those who were able to believe. Now again, that goes against what the Bible preaches, because if Brittany's on me about becoming a Christian and she's raptured up, well, I think, all right, well, she was pretty serious. I better get things together. But that's not what the Bible teaches. But what we find is, though, I can still have an opportunity in the tribulation to obey. Now, everybody that's a Christian is going to be gone. So they kind of teach that the world's going to kind of re-educate themselves in the Bible, and people will actually be saved during the tribulation. All right. Then the establishment of the millennial reign. So again, we have this 1,000-year Christ. He's ruling from Jerusalem. He's back on David's throne. And the nations are restored. Israel gets all their land. We talked about that last week. All the land promised, given back to all that. Peace and justice, righteousness fills the earth. Israel is spiritually restored and regathered. That's Zephaniah, I think, when we get into the Mount of Olives. Anyway, the curse of creation is partially lifted, this idea, and then the new heavens and the new earth. So that's it. That's what premillennial teaches. All of that. So what happens is, again, if you have someone who says, oh, I believe in the rapture, they have got to believe in all this other stuff. Because it can't all fit together with the rest of the Scripture unless we have all of this going on. So here quickly, and then I'll get some questions if you have any. So here's a chart. Hopefully you can kind of see that. Maybe you can see the words on it. But anyway, what you have is you have Israel there coming in. You have Christ coming on that line, that vertical line. His personal ministry. Again, notice the kingdom postponed. The Christ fails. Again, now many people will say, oh, I believe in the rapture. But if you say, well, did Christ fail on this earth to establish his kingdom? Many may say, well, I don't know about that. But if you believe in the rapture, you have to believe that. What happens is he's the cross. Plan B, we have the church age. And that's where we're in. So we're looking for the rapture of the saints. Again, this model, and there was a lot of models. I tried to pick the most concise one. Rapture of the saints, 7 years in paradise. The saints are 7 years of tribulation on earth. During this time, the temple is rebuilt. Then, again, you have the Antichrist rising up. He's established in the temple as God. Then you have the Christ return, the Battle of Armageddon, again, the restoration of the tribes, judgment, kingdom is established on earth, literal kingdom on earth, 1,000-year reign, Satan is bound, and there's peace on earth. And then, after all of that, which they have heaven eternity and then hell eternity, but really I think they're off in this chart because it should be that we return back to earth. After God renovates it, destroys it all, and that's what they're going to look at 2 Peter 3:10 and say, well, the world's going to be destroyed. God's going to create a new earth. We're all going to be down here on earth and live here. Which, like Brother Clark, the earth is God's footstool. So he's going to renovate his footstool and come live on earth. Because if you read the Revelation in 21, God's going to be with man. And he's going to be here with us. So if we believe that, if we're going to be back on earth, on a renovated earth, then God's going to be living here on earth. Even though the psalmist says that it is his footstool. Kind of interesting. Any questions? I know that was a lot. I will try to go through in better detail each one of these as we kind of progress. That's a good question. Yeah, it goes back pretty far. I'll try to get into that. I think I've got that in my notes when that kind of began. It doesn't go back out to the first century back, but it does go back pretty far. Right. Right. Yeah, like I said, you'll hear bits and pieces. You'll hear rapture, you'll hear Antichrist, mark of the beast, right? Things like that. But really, that's all of it, right? We have to go through all of it. All right. Anybody else?
Did they believe the Mormons?
Yeah.
Did they believe that Jerusalem was destroyed and they accepted? Did they even believe that?
Oh, that's a good one. Yeah, that first slide. Let me pull it. So you can see the word. If you think premillennial, that's what. If anything you learn, maybe you can learn to spell premillennialism when we get done with this. But this beginning, a study of eschatology, that is the study of end times. What Miss Linda's asking, I think is going to come up there. Okay, yeah. Some people think that the destruction of Jerusalem was all that was happening, and we're in that time. The kingdom's now on earth. It's very strange. It's the Max King. Have you ever heard that fellow named Max King? Some of your readings. There's a man. It's called the Max King doctrine, but that's what his thought is that all those events talked about in Revelation happened in AD 70, and now we're in the kingdom that's talked about. How you get that, I don't know. How he gets all that stuff. That is that, but yeah, they do think that those events happened, and that brings on all this. So. Now, these are good questions. Huh? Right. Yeah, which a good way to defend that is, when in heaven, we're neither married nor given in marriage, so, A lot of ways to refute that stuff. Those are great points. And I'm going to try to defend some of their arguments. I've never really got into much of Max King's doctrine, but there's a lot of holes in it. But Brittany makes a good question. When you read, I would encourage y'all to read some of this stuff. I know Warren and I talked one day. If you want to read into some of these things, do that. That way you can ask me some questions. What you will find, if you want to read about the rapture, you will hear everything. One person will have this view. One person will have that view. John MacArthur, I was talking about him a while ago, his view is that in the Revelation, in the beginning, I think the first 3 chapters, you have him talking about the church. He believes that in chapter 4, the church is resurrected or raptured up into heaven because you're in the throne room of God in chapter 4 and chapter 5. And then the 6 and following is the tribulation and the wrath. And then you have all that. And then we have in 21 the restoration of heaven on earth. So that's his view. But I was listening to 2 other gentlemen in this episode, and they said, no, that's not the way it is at all. So I don't know. There's a lot of holes to all this. To me, it's a lot simpler to just believe like what the Bible says in easy to understand passages that we don't know when Jesus will return. Jesus didn't even know when he was going to return. He's going to come back as a thief in the night. The world is going to be destroyed. We're going to be in heaven with him forever. We'll be judged. Those faithful will go to heaven. Those unfaithful will go to hell. Because that's what the Bible teaches in other easy to understand passages. There's a lot to do through all that. Anybody else? But yeah, the Max King 80-70 doctrine, do yourself, there you go, Miss Linda. I know you're studying a lot, but look up Max King 80-70 doctrine, because that's what he'll teach. He did teach. I don't know that he's still alive. But there's a good discussion on the new heavens and new earth. A lot of people think that we will be like what Brittany said. What we're going to do is we're going to be carried up into judgment, and then when we're in judgment, while we're in judgment, God's going to renovate the earth, and then we're going to come back down and be on earth. That's what they teach. Anyway, anybody else got anything like, why is this like that? Again, go back to Brother Clark, right? Before 1,000 years, it ain't so. That's it. Because it's a lot. Again, and I hope that maybe that helped open up your eyes, because if we stand on these things, we have to stand on all of them. So Lord willing, we'll be done here. Lord willing, we'll probably look next week into how to interpret prophecy. Because if you'll notice, when we were going through a lot of that, it's like a lot in Daniel, it's in a lot in Revelation, which are prophecies. So we have to understand how we can read that, and how we, again, kind of like Miss Linda, when you read a lot of this stuff, it is, especially Matthew 24, when we get into Matthew 24, that's the destruction of Jerusalem, and you have to be aware of that. And the restoring of Israel was back from captivity, so all that good stuff. Anybody else got anything?